Hi, my name is Ben Scout. I work for Utah State University Extension down in Washington County, so the southern corner of the state, and we're going to be going over pruning today. Today we're at the end of January, so in southern Utah we're a little bit warmer than northern Utah, but we'll start pruning usually in January, the first part. Northern Utah is usually a little bit later. They'll start pruning usually February, March. The goal is to prune before everything starts to break bud and we start having blossoms, so we want to be done pruning by that point. But we're here in Hurricane, we're at my family orchard, so we have primarily peach trees, so we have quite a few peaches. So if you look behind me, we've been pruning quite a bit. We actually started a little bit early. We started in December because we had so many trees. We usually don't get done unless we start earlier, but we've already pruned this orchard, so you can see kind of the end result, and you can see how much wood we're taking off. So this is a lot of fruiting wood, so you can see the color difference too. So this is really kind of a maroon color, kind of purplish. That's all the fruiting wood that we're taking a lot of it off. We're leaving a lot, but we're trying to reduce the fruit load a little bit just so we can manage it a little bit better. And that's pruning. And primarily for this video, we're going to be going over peaches. You can apply this to apricots and plums as well. Cherries are kind of their own animal, so we're going to stay away from cherries. Apples and pears are also different, but for this style of pruning, it works really well for peaches and apricots. Okay, so when we're pruning peach trees, there's 4 things that you need to keep in mind. So the first one is we are pruning for height and height adjustment. One of the questions we often get at the office is, well, can I just let my fruit tree grow or my peach tree go and not prune it from year to year? The problem you get is they will get really tall. It depends a little bit on what root stock they're on, if it's a dwarf, semi-dwarf, or a standard root stock, or on their own root stock. Will restrict their growth a little bit, but really when we're pruning, we're managing how high they're going to get. So all these trees are on a semi-dwarf rooting stock, which is the most common, and they grow really well. They're a pretty good size, but we're trying to keep them from getting their full height. They'll get about 25 feet tall, and if you can imagine being on a 10-foot ladder trying to pick all that fruit, it's really not practical. So the number one thing we're looking at with pruning is to restrict the height. The second thing we're doing is we are thinning out some of the fruiting wood. So when we first started, you can see all that fruiting wood that we had cut off. They produce a lot of fruiting wood. A good healthy peach tree will produce a tremendous amount. So we're trying to reduce some of that, so our workload's going to be less later in the year when we start thinning the trees to get some of that fruit off, so we'll have good high quality fruit and better tasting fruit. So that's the second one, is we're just trying to thin out some of the fruiting wood. And then the third one is one of the most important things with stone fruit, is most of them like to have an open center. They depend quite a bit on sunlight to be able to ripen uniformly, to also produce fruiting wood for next year. The sunlight into the middle is really critical and crucial for that. So we're going to be pruning out the middles. The fourth thing to keep in mind, and this is if you have a newer tree, if it's 1 to 4 years old, we're going to be structuring it really heavily those first 3 years, and the 4th year a little bit as well. What we're shooting for with peaches and going with an open center, a lot of old timers will call this the open vase style of pruning, but it's an open center pruning where we're having 4 to 5, well 3 to 5 really. You can get away with 3, and 5 is a little bit heavy, but in a backyard setting, 5 is okay. This one has probably 1 too many, but we have 4 main, these are called scaffolding branches. This is where everything's going to kind of branch off. You can tell it starts really low. This is what helps us keep our fruit trees low in the first place too. They don't start up here and start branching out, otherwise this tree would be another 4 to 5 feet taller. They start branching lower. We select for the best ones. We try to space them out as evenly as we can to get that spacing, so they're going in 4 different directions somewhat evenly, and that's what we're looking for when we're shaping them. That has to be done the first couple of years. Once they get to be a lot older, you're taking out really large pieces of wood to try and accomplish that, and it can be pretty detrimental to the tree. So the first 4 years we're going to be looking at that one, but again we're looking at the height, we're looking at opening the centers, thinning out the fruit wood, and then the first 4 years we're trying to get that structure and that shape in. So this tree, and where I like to start with opening up the center first. When you have an open center tree, the trees, if they had a brain, they're really opportunistic. They can tell that they have a space that sunlight is getting through, and it's not doing them any good unless they can put a leaf there. So they're always going to fill up the centers every year. So the first thing to do is we're going to cut out what are called water sprouts. And those are these branches that are growing almost straight up. They grow up right up into the middle. They have to come out, so I always start with what has to come out first, and then we'll do the other steps as we go. So these ones have to come out, we're going to prune those. When you're pruning, there's a couple pieces of equipment that you need as well. The first one, of course, is the set of pruners. I have electric ones. The brand is Infico, and we have so many trees, it makes it a lot easier than trying to use your loppers, but loppers work. You'll want something that has they're called bypass shears. So you want something that's going to pass the cutting edge. So when it goes down, it makes a clean cut all the way through. Versus they have some that are like an anvil type shear where they press against. They have a bar on the bottom that the blade hits against directly, and it kind of squishes things. These ones work the best. They make the cleanest cut and the tree heals better. The second thing is you're going to need some kind of a saw. It can be a hand saw. We have just an electric chainsaw. You can have an actual gas-powered chainsaw. A Sawzall works just fine. Whatever you have to cut maybe some larger branches out. Once they get to be about 2 inches in diameter, it's really hard to put enough pressure on your shears to cut those, and it can also damage the blade. So having a saw is really handy. Also a ladder. If you have a taller tree or an older tree that you can't get any lower, a ladder is usually required. For my trees, we've kept them low enough that I can reach everything by hand, just so we're staying away from ladders a little bit, but you may need a ladder as well. Those are really the 3 things that you need to prune. So we're gonna go in and we'll start pruning out the middles. And just as a kind of a cleanliness thing, I always throw the limbs out. That way I don't leave anything in here that I get confused as I'm pruning. Just to make sure that I'm not leaving anything in there that I might mix up when I'm cutting later that's already been cut. So you just keep everything kind of clean, throw it out as you're cutting. We're gonna get rid of all the water sprouts. Okay, so we've gotten rid of most of the water sprouts. The other thing to do is there's still a lot of little branches that are growing up in the middle, so we're just gonna go ahead and clear all those little branches out. All right, so we've got the middles cleaned out. The next thing we're gonna work on is the height, just to make sure that everything's at the right height. We're not going too high. For a commercial operation, we're trying to keep them low enough that we don't have to have ladders really at all, and we try and avoid them. So everything I can usually reach, anything above that we try and prune off. Also, when you make a lot of these cuts, it's important not just to leave little stubs sticking up. You try and go back to a good main branch, and then you'll cut right above that and leave maybe about 1/4 of an inch as you cut. So we'll adjust for the height. Pretty good on the height. So we've gone around, taken everything off so it's at a manageable height. Then again, the third thing that we're keeping in mind is we're gonna thin things out so we can get rid of some of the fruiting wood. And it also allows the fruit as it matures, it'll have enough room to grow. So looking at these branches, there's a lot going on with them. So at this part, we're trying to select good fruiting wood. So this is what fruiting wood looks like. It's kind of that purplish red color. You're also looking at the buds. So fruiting wood and where the fruit's going to be have kind of unique little buds. They come on in clusters. It looks like a cluster of 2. There's actually 3 buds. The third one's hard to see, but the 2 big buds will turn into a blossom. There's one right in the middle that will be a leaf. But so looking for those, you can tell this piece of fruiting wood would have had peaches all along it. So as you're pruning, you can tell where the fruit's going to come on and where it's going to be. The best fruiting wood is about the diameter of a pencil or larger. So we're trying to select for that. So we'll go in on these branches we've left. We're going to try and thin it out so there's enough room between the branches that the fruit's going to have enough room to come on and grow. Okay, so this branch is pretty good. We're trying to leave the biggest and best fruiting wood that's on there. So we're selecting for that. So then as we go around, we'll just look at it. A lot of them have a lot going on. You can't hardly stick your hand through because there's so much happening. So we'll start thinning out anything that's going to be crossing over one another and opening it up. Then I'll just go around and do one more pass just to make sure everything looks the way I would like it. Again, once you've gone through it once too, or once you've done one pass, when you go back, it's really easy to tell if you have areas that are really heavy. So I can tell this branch is heavier than the rest of the branches on the tree. So I've got to thin it out just a little bit more. Okay. I talked about before too how you don't want to leave stubs. So this is what would be considered a stub. It's about 3 inches tall. There's nothing that's going to be growing on it. So we're going to cut it off. So with whatever saw you would have, you can use that to make it a bit cleaner. All right, so this is what the tree's going to look like when it's all done and pruned. We have accomplished those 4 things, 3 really, unless you have a young tree, but we brought it down so it's more manageable. Everything's, for me, is within arm's reach. If you have a larger tree, as long as you're keeping it as short as you can, that way you can reach the fruit. We've opened up the center that allows the sunlight to go through and throughout the tree and allow for more uniform ripening. We've gone through and we've thinned out the really heavy branches. A way to tell if you're not thinning out your branches well enough is if in the spring and in past years, if you're having to go out with 2x4s or anything to prop up your peach trees, one, you're not thinning too much, but you're also probably leaving too much fruit wood on. A good healthy tree, one that's producing good quality fruit, should never have to have boards underneath it to prop it up. And that goes back to how you've pruned them, so you can tell that this can support a tremendous amount of weight. And then when you thin it, it does help reduce your fruit load, and you make up what you're throwing on the ground. And so many people have such a hard time throwing fruit on the ground when it gets to thinning season. But you make up the volume that you're throwing on the ground in quantity of size on your peaches. Pruning definitely helps with that. It's not nearly as overwhelming to throw so much fruit on the ground because you have so much fruit wood on your peach tree that's producing fruit. By reducing that, you have a fewer amount that you're able to thin. It also allows the same thing, light penetration to get into the tree a lot better to help that fruit ripen. Helps with the airflow so you don't have disease problems. So that's why we're thinning out the fruiting wood so much. But that's what it looks like when we're all done. It doesn't take too long once you get the hang of it. You can do this with just your regular loppers. You can use a small pair of snips to get some of the smaller stuff if you want, and then having a saw to make some of those bigger cuts so you can make your tree a healthy and manageable size.